And now I'm going to read the introduction, which is titled The Power of a Green God by J. Matthew Sleeth, who is an MD, medical doctor. The Green Bible, which you hold in your hands, is an answer to prayer. It has been an amazing journey to arrive at this place, but before I get ahead of myself, let me first share my story and how I got here. One February break at the turn of the millennium, our family left the gray winters of northern New England and headed to an island off the coast of Florida for vacation. On the second day, our children, Clark and Emma, wore themselves out playing in the surf, building sand castles, and catching chameleons. The kids went to bed early, and my wife, Nancy, and I found ourselves alone. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set and the stars rise. The island on which we stayed had no cars or roads. The cares of the world were an ocean away, and the sights and sounds of nature lulled us to peace. Lulled us to peace. Time slowed. The nebula in the constellation Orion shone clearly. In that relaxed moment, surrounded by palm trees murmuring in the wind, Nancy asked me a question that was to change my life forever. What, she queried, is the biggest problem facing the world? Despite or because of the peaceful surroundings, I considered her question an earnest. The contenders for humankind's greatest problem are many: war, terrorism, poverty, disease, starvation, and, at the root of everything, selfishness. I considered the choices and said, the world is dying. My answer did not come from abstract sources. Many changes had already taken place in my life and are now readily apparent to anyone with eyes to see. The last of the majestic chestnut trees near my childhood home are now extinct. There are no chestnuts on Chestnut Lane, no elms on Elm Street, no caribou in Caribou, Maine, and no buffalo in Buffalo, New York. Multiple states have had to change their official tree, animal, or flower because of extinction. I grew up in the mid-Atlantic area. In just a single generation, the fields that supported 300 years of inhabitants have all been replanted with houses. The flocks of birds that migrated for hours over our backyard in spring and fall are gone. The snow fences that road crews put up every October are no longer needed because it rarely snows now. These changes in the health of the planet are mirrored in humans. A few months before vacation, I had admitted 3 women to the hospital. All 3 were in their 30s, all 3 had breast cancer, and all 3 died. It is not easy to tell a man with 1 child in his hip and another in hand that he is on his own. There is only one response: to hug and cry with them. That's so sad. Later, I wondered about the lifetime risk of breast cancer, so I went and looked it up. When I started medicine, 1 in 19 women in America got breast cancer. When I saw the 3 women with breast cancer, the same updated medical text said it was 1 in 9. Now, a few years later, it is 1 in 7. There is currently a pandemic of cancers, and the most dramatic increases have been in young people. Similarly, there have been increases in asthma, autoimmune diseases, autism, and other maladies. Maladies? I have to Google that. Which many believe have direct environmental links. Of course, No one can suppose that these trends in nature and in us can continue unchanged and everything will turn out all right. What will you do about it? Nancy wanted to know that night in Florida. I had no answer. When we returned home, my journey began. On the surface, our life looked good. I had a job as an emergency room physician and was chief of the medical staff at a picturesque hospital. We had the traditional nuclear family, complete with son and daughter. I drove a fast car with a teak dashboard, and when I got home, I pushed a button and one of the two garage doors opened automatically. Yet we had no spiritual anchor, no particular religious worldview. Nancy and I grew up in different faith backgrounds. She had been raised in a conservative Jewish home. I had been raised in a Protestant home, but it hadn't taken. Other than to see someone wed or memorialized, I'd not been inside a church in 25 years. I believed that good science and reasoning could solve all of life's problems. My search for environmental answers paralleled a new faith journey. It began to be apparent to me that there was something more. So much of what makes up the human experience cannot be measured by a micrometer. How does one quantify justice, love, peace, or beauty? How does one explain evil? So I began reading through the world's sacred texts. There are many truths to be found on the pages of the Bhagavad Gita. I absolutely agree. The Quran and the Ramayana. But I did not find the answers I sought. One day, sitting in the waiting room of the hospital, I picked up a copy of the Bible. I began reading the book of Matthew. It changed everything. I found answers. I learned that the compelling truth of the scriptures is not to be proven by archaeological, scientific, or theological theorems. The power of the Bible is most evident in its ability to change lives. It can transform a wealthy Italian playboy into a saint. Saint Francis of Assisi? I didn't know that. By its amazing grace, it can transform a W. King murderous slave trader into a humble abolitionist. John Newton. Wow. It can transfigure prostitutes into women of virtue, cowards into rocks of the church, and the proud into the meek. When I read the Gospels and thought about the world's environmental problems, I found answers. Matthew 7:1 struck me as particularly compelling. Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be measured you get. How often, in all walks of life, do we judge others by standards different from the one we use to measure our own shortcomings? When I applied these words of Christ to myself, I did not like what I found. I was concerned about pollution and the death of the world. But what about our family's part in it? So we took an accounting. Our family added up all the energy we used and the trash and pollution we made. This exercise is called ecologic footprinting. We found our family was average for the United States. Although this was better than most doctors or people in our neighborhood, it was a poor showing compared to the rest of the world. On average, consumption by Americans is doubled that of our British counterparts, and multiple times more than our African, Chinese, or Indian brothers and sisters. After telling us not to judge others, Christ instructs us to clean up our own act. He understands that the surest excuse for us not to do the right thing is our innate ability to spot flaws in others. We are instructed to get the 2x4 out of our own eye before we worry about the speck of sawdust in our neighbor's eye. After we measured our energy usage, our family took Christ at his word and set about changing.